Hello everyone and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. When my neighbor disappeared without a trace. I was initially concerned but not overly alarmed. It wasn't until weeks later, when the eerie stillness of his apartment became disturbingly evident, that I truly began to worry. It wasn't like Robert to vanish without a word, and the police's indifferent response, suggesting that his disappearance might have been voluntary, did nothing to ease my mind. I had known Robert for years. His peculiar habits, his polite nods whenever we crossed paths in the hallway, and his strange collection of antique clocks, their rhythmic ticking seeping through the thin walls of our building. As time passed, a growing sense of unease settled in my thoughts. What if Robert's disappearance wasn't as innocent as it seemed? He had always been an enigmatic man. He rarely socialized with the other tenants, but when he did, his air of courtesy made him likable despite his reserved nature. The building management followed standard protocol for absences like his. Some notices, a few phone calls, and if necessary, a lock change. But Robert's apartment remained untouched, steeped in a silence heavy with unanswered questions. My curiosity soon turned into obsession. I began cautiously investigating Robert's life, ensuring I didn't alert anyone to my intentions. Exploring the building for clues was my first step. It was an old but charming place, its history tangled in time. Robert always seemed like someone who lived in the past, which might explain why he had chosen this building, a place with an aura of nostalgia, a whisper of forgotten eras. With a feigned excuse of leaving him a note about his unpaid rent, I managed to enter his apartment using the spare key the management provided. The door creaked open, revealing a stillness so dense it felt tangible. Everything inside was meticulously arranged. The furniture was draped in dust-laden sheets. His antique clocks continued ticking, and the books on his shelves were lined with obsessive precision, as if patiently waiting for someone to pick them up again. What caught my attention the most was a desk in the corner, cluttered with letters, old newspapers, and a few photographs. I hesitated for a moment before sifting through the pile, hoping to find any clue about his disappearance. Among the documents, something made my breath catch, a yellowed letter. My name scrawled on the front in Robert's elegant handwriting. My heart pounded as I unfolded the letter with trembling hands. Dear neighbor, if you're reading this, it means I was unable to deliver this message in person. There are things you need to know, things you might prefer not to discover. I've followed a trail that leads to you. It may seem strange, but there are shadows in your past that you might not even be aware of. I've learned things about you that are unsettling. You've always been curious, but sometimes curiosity leads to truths better left buried. If you find this letter, proceed with caution. The search for answers may reveal more than you expect. Sincerely, Robert. My hands trembled as I finished reading. What had Robert discovered about me that warranted such a cryptic warning? The idea that he might have known something sinister about my life sent a chill down my spine. I had always lived an ordinary existence. An office job, a modest apartment, a quiet routine. What shadows could possibly lurk in my past for Robert to leave such a message? Determined to find out the truth, I began delving into my own history, something I had never given much thought to before. I sifted through old documents, photographs, and even reached out to acquaintances from years past. At first, everything seemed normal, but the deeper I dug, the more inconsistencies I found. There were gaps in my history, people who had disappeared from my life without explanation, and events I couldn't clearly remember. One memory stood out, a move to another city years ago. I had left behind a group of friends, some of whom seemed particularly interested in my departure. Could they be connected to whatever Robert had uncovered? I tried tracking them down, but every attempt to contact them was met with the vague responses or an avoidance of the topic. It was as if they were deliberately hiding something. As the weeks passed, my obsession with the case grew. I returned to Robert's apartment several times, each visit peeling back another layer of his strange world. His meticulous collection of artifacts, his journal filled with cryptic notes, and his relentless investigation into the occult and secret societies. Everything pointed to an obsession with something beyond the ordinary. Yet I still couldn't understand how it all connected to me. One night, while examining his journal, I noticed a pattern in his notes. There was a connection between his research and a series of unresolved disappearances. The dates and locations eerily coincided with my own life. It seemed Robert had been assembling a puzzle that not only involved his investigation, but was somehow deeply intertwined with my existence. With every new revelation, I felt as if I was nearing a point of no return. The more I uncovered, the more I felt that someone was watching me. The unease that had accompanied Robert's disappearance now loomed over my own life. What had started as mere curiosity had spiraled into a terrifying descent into the unknown. My own disappearance was beginning to seem like a real possibility. By chasing Robert's shadows, I had unearthed a darkness that seemed eager to consume me. I stood at a crossroads. Continue untangling the threads of Robert's research or step back from the abyss I had fallen into. The truth was, some mysteries were never meant to be solved. Some secrets were better left buried, hidden in the silence of lives that vanished without a trace. Story 2. I arrived home to an unsettling scene that would forever alter my perception of security. The front door, which had always been a firm barrier between my private life and the outside world, was slightly ajar. My heart began pounding as I slowly pushed it open. The familiar creak of the hinges sounded more ominous than ever. A stale, heavy air greeted me, carrying a faint metallic scent that sent a ripple of fear through my body. My home, my sanctuary, had been invaded. Every drawer, every cabinet, every surface had been ransacked. Papers were strewn across the floor, cushions thrown aside, personal belongings upturned and scattered in every direction. What had once been an orderly and safe space now mirrored the chaos of the violation I had just suffered. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. Reality settled over me like a slow-moving tide. The initial panic gave way to numb disbelief as I stepped further into the wreckage. But it wasn't just the physical disarray that disturbed me. There was something deeper, an unsettling sense that something essential had been stolen from me. And then it hit me. They had stolen my identity. The realization struck like a crashing wave. I grabbed my phone and hurriedly called my bank, clinging to the hope that this was all some sort of misunderstanding. An automated system guided me through a maze of options before a representative finally answered. "Hello, my name is Alex Carter. I believe my identity has been stolen. My front door was open. My house has been ransacked. I need to know if there have been any unauthorized transactions on my account," I said, my voice trembling. The representative's tone was calm and professional, but it did little to soothe my frayed nerves. I answered their questions, verified my identity, and then came the worst news imaginable. Several large transactions had been made from my accounts over the past week. My heart sank further as the representative assured me they were launching an investigation, but the recovery process would be long. I hung up the phone, my mind tangled in anxiety and confusion. The gravity of the situation deepened as I made frantic calls to other institutions where my personal information might have been compromised. Each call yielded the same grim response: frozen accounts, new fraudulent activities reported, and an endless list of steps I needed to take to reclaim my identity. The following weeks became a whirlwind of legal battles and bureaucratic nightmares. I spent countless hours on the phone with banks, credit agencies, and law enforcement. My life became a series of transactions and paperwork, each more overwhelming than the last. The feeling of violation was omnipresent, a constant reminder that my privacy had been torn apart at its very core. Each day brought new alerts about suspicious activities or accounts opened in my name without my consent. It felt as though someone else was living my life, making decisions, moving through my world in ways I could no longer control. It was maddening to realize that my identity had been manipulated with such terrifying precision. I started receiving calls from creditors demanding payments for debts I had never incurred. I found myself trapped in an endless cycle of proving my innocence and fighting to reclaim what was rightfully mine. But the most terrifying part wasn't the financial loss. It was the gut-wrenching feeling that the imposter knew every intimate detail of my life. Not only had they stolen my identity, but they seemed to be using it with an unsettling level of accuracy. My preferences, my hobbies, even my social connections were being exploited against me. This wasn't just about money. It was about the emotional devastation of knowing that someone had invaded my privacy so deeply that they seemed to understand my life better than I did. The sense of stolen control was perhaps the hardest thing to accept. Knowing that someone else was using my name, my social security number, my reputation to construct a new identity was deeply unsettling. I no longer felt like the same person I had been before the invasion. As the months passed, I slowly began to rebuild my life. I implemented new security measures, changed all my passwords, and monitored my financial accounts with near-paranoid vigilance. But no precaution could erase the emotional scars left by the experience. In the end, the recovery process wasn't just about reclaiming my identity. It was about reclaiming my peace of mind. The thief had taken more than just my personal information. They had taken a part of my security, my trust in the world. Gradually, as I restored my credit, received apologies from affected institutions, and found some semblance of normalcy in my daily life, I began to feel stronger. Yet the memory of that day, the moment I stepped into my violated home, remains an indelible mark on my psyche. It serves as a stark reminder of how fragile the boundaries of privacy truly are, and of the chilling reality that somewhere at some point, someone had lived my life with a precision and intimacy that left me feeling like a stranger in my own existence. Story 3. The attic had always been a place of mystery and discovery. Dusty trunks and old boxes were piled haphazardly, filled with relics from a bygone era. One rainy afternoon, I found myself sorting through them, driven by the desire to organize the space and perhaps unearth something interesting among the forgotten artifacts. That was when a small leather-bound journal caught my attention. It was worn and aged, with faded golden initials that were nearly illegible. Curiosity gripped me. Carefully, I wiped off the dust and opened it. The pages were filled with elegant, flowing handwriting. The ink faded into a soft sepia tone. Each entry was dated, chronicling what appeared to be the life of a man from a time long before mine. His observations were sharp, his thoughts reflective. The writings ranged from simple daily occurrences to profound reflections on life and love. I was captivated as I read on, slowly piecing together the story of this enigmatic diarist. His name was Henry Lawson, and his entries spanned several decades. He wrote about his work as a carpenter, his love for his family, and his dream of traveling. His words painted the portrait of a man who had lived in the early 20th century, a time so different from my own. When I reached the final entry, I expected to find a fitting conclusion to the tone of the journal, perhaps a farewell or a reflection on a life well lived. Instead, what I found was something far more unsettling. The last entry was dated just days before his death, and it described an event that I had recently experienced. In fact, it was so specific that it couldn't have been a coincidence. Henry recounted an afternoon at a small cafe in the city. He described the scene with remarkable precision. The same cafe I had visited weeks earlier. The blue ceramic teapot, the red and white checkered tablecloth, the way the sunlight streamed through the window. He even mentioned a conversation with a young woman wearing a blue dress, exactly the dress I had worn that day. My heartbeat quickened as I continued reading. Henry described with perfect detail my actions, my thoughts, even my emotions from that afternoon. The accuracy was impossible to ignore. The entry ended with a cryptic note. I feel as if the threads of time have woven my life with yours. I hope you understand what I mean. A growing sense of unease settled over me as I frantically flipped through the pages, searching for an explanation. But there was nothing else. Henry had died in 1945. I had been born many decades later. How could his experiences align so precisely with mine? For a fleeting moment, I considered the possibility that someone else had written these entries, blending his life with mine. But the handwriting, the ink, and the style were unmistakably his. Desperate for answers, I decided to dig deeper into Henry's life. I visited the local historical society and searched through old records. I confirmed that Henry had indeed lived in the early 20th century and had passed away in 1945. He had no known descendants or heirs, meaning his journal had remained untouched for decades. The historian I spoke with had no concrete explanation, only an unsettling observation that sometimes the inexplicable happens and that our understanding of time might not be as linear as we believe. I left the archives feeling no closer to an answer, struggling with the idea that the boundaries between the past and the present might be far more flexible than I had ever imagined. The last entry in the journal haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Henry's words had somehow bridged a gap between his life and mine. Determined to uncover more about the man whose experiences had, in some inexplicable way, intertwined with my own, I returned to the attic. Searching through the same trunk where I had found the journal, I discovered an old photograph of Henry. He had a kind yet contemplative face. I studied it for a long time, wondering if there was a deeper connection between us, some hidden link that I had yet to uncover. Despite my confusion, I felt an odd sense of peace. The journal had given me a glimpse into a life I would have never otherwise known. It was as if Henry's story and mine were part of a greater tapestry, one that defied conventional ideas of time and space. As months passed, I continued reflecting on the impact the journal had on my life. It had led me to question my own existence, to appreciate how our lives can intersect, even across time. I placed the journal in a special spot, treating it as a precious relic of a distant past that was, somehow, intimately connected to me. In the end, the journal had done more than recount a life long gone. It had enriched my own, revealing the mysterious ties that bind us beyond time itself. The final entry remained a poignant reminder of the enigmas that surround us, a testament to the eternal nature of human experience. Story 4. Late at night, as the last rays of sunlight faded beyond the horizon, Sarah felt an unusual sense of unease in her suburban home. She had always felt secure within these walls, but tonight was different. There was a tension in the air, almost tangible, like a shadow looming over her peaceful routine. As she prepared for bed, an unexpected discovery would shatter her sense of security and plunge her into a nightmare she never could have imagined. It all began when Sarah noticed a small, unfamiliar device among her kitchen appliances. It was a tiny black camera, sleek and discreet, placed so inconspicuously above the microwave that she had almost missed it. She froze, confusion and a creeping sense of fear flooding her mind. She was certain that camera hadn't been there before. The lens seemed to stare at her, unblinking, like a watchful eye. With trembling hands, she quickly turned it off. Trying to calm herself, Sarah decided to head to her bedroom, hoping a good night's rest would clear her mind. But as she stepped inside, another chill ran down her spine. In the corner of the ceiling, barely noticeable against the neutral paint, was a second camera. The realization hit her like lightning. There were cameras in her home that she had never installed. Her mind raced with questions. Who had put them there? Why? How long had they been recording? Panic set in as she scrambled for answers. She quickly searched her phone for ways to detect hidden cameras. The idea of being watched, of someone having access to her most private moments, was unbearable. As the night stretched on, she decided to check the recordings stored in the devices. She connected her phone to the memory cards, hoping for some harmless explanation. But as the videos began to play, her worst fears were confirmed. The recordings displayed various parts of her home. One showed Sarah in the kitchen, wearing her pajamas, making a late-night snack, completely unaware of the camera watching her. Another captured her sitting in the living room, lost in a book, oblivious to the lens tracking her every movement. But the most disturbing footage was from her bedroom. The recording showed her undressing, changing clothes, preparing for bed. private moments that should have belonged to her alone, now stored and viewed by an unknown intruder. Horror and rage surged through her. Her home, her sanctuary, had been turned into a stage for the worst kind of invasion of privacy. Without hesitation, she called the police and reported the discovery. An officer arrived quickly, inspecting the cameras and reviewing the recorded footage. They took the devices as evidence, assuring her they would investigate the matter thoroughly. As she recounted her experience to the officers, her hands trembled. She felt a mix of relief and terror. It was reassuring that they were taking the case seriously, but the trust she once had in her own home was shattered. Days turned into weeks as Sarah waited for answers. She lived in a constant state of anxiety. Her house no longer felt like a refuge. It felt like a trap. The police updates were scarce, and the uncertainty gnawed at her. Every creak of the floorboards, every unexpected sound sent her into a panic. The cozy corners of her home now seemed dark and menacing. One night, as she checked her mailbox, she found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a chilling message. "I know you're afraid. You should be. I see everything." The note wasn't signed, but the message was clear. Whoever had been watching her knew she had discovered the cameras. They knew her fear, her vulnerability, and they were mocking her. This new blow only deepened her terror. Sarah doubled her security measures, installing more cameras, setting up alarms, and changing her daily routines to avoid predictability. But the damage had already been done. Fear had become a constant shadow in her life. Months passed, but the police investigation led nowhere. Despite their efforts, the identity of the perpetrator remained a mystery. Sarah had to face the grim reality that she might never know who had invaded her privacy, or why. She continued living in the house, but it was no longer the place of peace and comfort it had once been. Now it was a battleground, a place where vigilance and caution were necessary at all times. The cameras were gone, but the emotional scars remained. Recovering her privacy and sense of security was a long and painful process. She had learned a harsh lesson about the fragility of safety, how easy it was to become a victim of privacy invasion. Over time, she found small moments of relief. She reconnected with friends, tried to reestablish a normal routine, and fought to reclaim her personal space. Yet the shadow of that night, the night she realized that her most private moments had been stolen, never truly disappeared. It remained a constant reminder that danger doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it lurks within the very places we feel safest. Story 5. When I woke up, the world was a whirlwind of muffled sounds and confusion. A dense, nauseating fog of disorientation clouded my senses, making it nearly impossible to distinguish where I was or what had happened. My wrists were tightly bound behind my back, and a thick, coarse piece of fabric covered my eyes, plunging me into complete darkness. Panic began to rise, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to assess the situation before figuring out how to escape. The blindfold was made of heavy, dark material, pressing firmly against my eyelids and ensuring that not even the faintest sliver of light could break through. As my breathing steadied, I became more aware of my surroundings. The air was stale, laced with a faint, acrid industrial scent. My skin registered the hardness of the surface beneath me, cold and unyielding. I shifted slightly and realized I was lying on something solid, possibly a wooden floor. Then I heard it. A faint creak. It was almost imperceptible, but enough to spark a flicker of hope. I wasn't alone. Someone had been in this room with me recently. Summoning every ounce of courage, I tried to move, searching for any clue about my predicament. After several minutes of uncomfortable twisting and straining, my fingers brushed against something smooth and solid. It was covered in dust, and as I explored its surface with my bound hands, I recognized its shape. It was a book, a journal. Its leather cover was cool and stiff beneath my fingertips. My heart pounded as I recalled the note I had glimpsed just before the blindfold was secured over my eyes. With difficulty, I managed to bring the journal closer, fumbling to open it. Seconds later, I succeeded. The pages rustled softly as I began to read, relying on the faint light seeping through the edges of my blindfold. The first entry was short and terrifying. If you're reading this, it means you've chosen to survive. Follow the instructions carefully if you want to get out. Your time starts now. The words were accompanied by a series of cryptic symbols and a rough sketch of the room, marking several locations. The instructions were sparse but carried an unmistakable urgency. You must find the hidden key in the room. To do so, solve the riddles in this journal. Each one will lead you to the next step. If you fail, your chances of survival will diminish. I swallowed hard and tried to visualize the layout of the space based on the rough diagram. There were a few notable elements: a heavy wooden door, an old wobbly table, and various scattered objects. The only visible source of light was a small window high up on the wall. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Each entry was a puzzle, each one leading to a hidden compartment or a new clue. The first riddle seemed simple but required careful observation. The journal mentioned that certain objects in the room were aligned in an unusual way and that finding the correct pattern would reveal a hidden compartment. After agonizing minutes of blind fumbling and desperate groping, my fingers brushed against a loose floorboard beneath the table. With great effort, I pried it open and felt something cold and metallic. The first key. The next step in the journal instructed me to use the key to unlock a drawer in the table, where I would find another clue. My heart pounded as I inserted the key into the lock. A soft click confirmed it had worked. Inside the drawer was another note and a riddle. The message contained a sequence of numbers, which I needed to use to unlock a combination padlock on a box hidden in the corner of the room. Sweat dripped down my forehead as I struggled to decipher the code. The numbers swirled in my mind, frustration mounting with each failed attempt. Finally, after several tense minutes, I cracked the combination. Inside the box, I found a small vial of liquid and another note. The message explained that the liquid would reveal hidden writing when applied to certain surfaces. My pulse quickened as I realized its purpose. I poured the liquid onto the walls and floor, revealing nearly invisible inscriptions guiding me to another hidden compartment. The final clue was the most cryptic of all. It required arranging certain objects in a precise order to unlock a secret panel behind the door. With a mix of desperation and determination, I worked quickly, every second stretching into eternity. The blindfold was suffocating me, and the pressure in my chest was overwhelming. At last I heard it. A click. The panel opened. Inside was a small dusty key, the key to the door. With trembling hands, I inserted it into the lock and turned. The door creaked open, and a rush of fresh air hit my face as I stumbled forward into the hallway. I tore the blindfold off my eyes, blinking rapidly against the sudden light. I was in a dark, dilapidated corridor, the peeling wallpaper and broken lamps casting eerie shadows. Seeing that hallway felt like a victory, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down. I had barely survived the first test. The journal had guided me through a terrifying ordeal, and as I took my first steps into the unknown hallway, a chilling realization settled over me. The worst was far from over.